All right, good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're well. Now, let me just ensure that everything is working. I've not done this for a very, very long time, it feels like. So, apologies if this isn't as optimal as it used to be. We're going to cover the budget, the spring announcement today. Let me just move this over as well. Bear me 1 second. We want. Okay, so please let me know. Can you hear me clearly? Can you see me clearly as well if you just joined? I think they have PMQs right now. The announcement should be starting in about 13 minutes time. So what I intend to do is just watch along really, see what they announce, see if there's anything in there that might be a bit of a surprise to us that we weren't aware might be on the radar. And yeah, generally just see how they're going to shank us for today. How about that? So it's going to be very interesting. We're hearing already that she's going to blame her decisions today on Donald Trump, of all people. I mean, talk about taking accountability for your own decisions over the past, what, 6 months into, I'll say 6 months, but since the election. Talk about taking responsibility for your own actions and the fact that your decisions around national insurance contribution increases for businesses has been a contributing factor to the fact that the economy has been really, really slow and not as progressive as we would have liked. We're in a bit of a mess. We're in a bit of a bind. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they're going to spin this. What we do know is that there are likely going to be cuts. I think in PMQs already, they're already asking the question of how can you justify cuts to people who are going to be on benefits, because that's been the big one that's been in the news. And Keir Starmer, as you would expect, being the politician, is talking about how, yes, my family members have also had to deal with disabilities, forgetting the fact that he's a multi-millionaire now. So technically speaking, you're not really in the game the same way the other people are. Neither are your family to a certain extent. So this is going to be very, very interesting indeed. I want to see how they're going to spin this. But like I said, we'll just do a watch along, a reaction. I'd love to get your thoughts and your feedback based on what we hear, because the last time we did this, there was quite a lot of reaction and conversation to be had. So let me just check the feed and see what they're doing, where they are. Make sure that we are actually up to date as well. Yeah, Kia's still yapping at the moment with Rachel Reeve sat behind him. Just a question for you. Obviously, we've been paying a lot of attention to the fact that things like the cash ISA, we didn't want changing. Anything that encumbers your ability to put money aside, to have it working for you, we don't want any changes to that. We don't know whether or not they're going to address the pensions relief, which I kind of covered in the 7 things that might be in the budget a few weeks ago. The pension relief one, whilst it penalizes a certain segment, I can get on board with that, because if they just standardize the pension relief at 33%, it means that those people who are on lower incomes, who can't necessarily contribute as much into their pensions as those people who are on higher wages, then it means that the relief is going to help them end up with a larger sum of money later on in life. I can get on board with that. I understand that some people will be concerned about that, because if you are a 45% taxpayer, maybe even higher, that is going to be a huge, huge impact or deduction, I guess, in tax relief for you, therefore impacting your eventual pension pot. Now, the argument there is going to be one that we always have as a society, and it is the automatic assumption that if you're 45%, 60% taxpayer, well, you should be in a position where you have a good enough pension anyway. There are lots of nuances to that argument. It's not always as clean cut, because people have different circumstances depending on where they are at life and the size of their family, so on and so forth. But it'll be interesting to see if she touches this today, for sure. What other things have been in the news that she's potentially going to be looking at? There is a huge debate over how she's going to handle raising more money, so borrowing money, using the debt ratios. I don't know exactly how that works. I'm not an economist, but fundamentally it's all about how she can raise money to spend on projects, which basically increases the national debt. And we always talk about balancing the books. well, how soon are you likely to balance the books? There has been, and there will be, I guess, some announcements to what we're hearing around defense spending that has to go up. We're already hearing that the defense spending is going to be taken from the welfare budget, so the foreign aid budget. We also know that there is also supposedly going to be a £2 billion sweetener for people trying to get on the property ladder. So young people trying to get on the property ladder. Those two things, well, the latter definitely would be welcomed, I guess, for younger people trying to buy their first homes. So we'll see in what form this comes out and in what sequence it comes out. It's also going to be very, very interesting as well to hear the framing of all of these announcements as well. If you remember last year in the autumn budget, just as obviously Rishi was leaving, he was so passionate about the changes that she made being the wrong move for the economy. So much so that on the live, if you joined me then, I was kind of asking, where's his passion been this entire time? As PM, he was very calm, collected, spoke very softly, and all of a sudden, he was visibly angry, and he didn't kind of play the politician and just try and keep it in. He literally let it rip. And I think it would seem more of that side of him as PM. Maybe people would have liked him a little bit more, but we are where we are now. So it's going to be very interesting to see what gets announced. I'm just watching the feed right here. Actually, let's just jump into the feed and see what happens with this. So let me just add this on. Let's go.
Because they've had their long-term funding removed. Will we consider using our existing contributions to the Partnership Fund for a Resilient Ukraine to restore that important work that they're doing, and in doing so, restore the hope that those children can be returned to their anguished families?
Prime Minister. I'm grateful to him for emphasising this again. Russia's abduction of Ukrainian children is sickening, and I think across the House we would all agree on that. A peace settlement in Ukraine must see Russia held to account and the children reunited with their families. And in specific reference to his question, the UK is playing our full part in international efforts, including funding the Bring Kids Back initiative through the Partnership Fund for a Resilient Ukraine. And I want to reassure the whole House we'll do everything we can to see these children returned and reintegrated as safely and as quickly as is possible.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The 7-year-old adoptive daughter of my constituent Sarah suffered immense trauma in her early years. Thanks to support from the Adoption and Special Guardianship
Welcome, John.
Support Fund,
thanks for joining.
Able to access
Actually, thank you to everyone for joining. Like, I know that it's obviously midday,
and thousands of others
people are busy, but you just being here is really appreciative. Thank you.
In just 5 days, that fund ends, and ministers have repeatedly refused to confirm whether it will continue. So can the Prime Minister give a cast iron guarantee to vulnerable children, adoptive parents and kinship carers that he won't cut this fund, and so that, in Sarah's words, she can give her daughter the absolute best second chance in life she deserves?
Well, we will set out details just as soon as we can on the basis of the principles that I set out earlier. The scheme overall, in terms of welfare, is not defendable on terms, but it must be a scheme that supports those that need it, and the details will be set out.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. While our nation was being engulfed last year by racist riots in Slough, Christians, Hindus, Jews, Sikhs, people of faith and no faith openly declared that if anybody tried to attack a mosque in our town, we'd stand in solidarity with our local Muslim community to protect it. However, since then, many have become more fearful with a rise in Islamophobic attacks, including this month at a mosque in Aberdeen. So can my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, confirm to the country what steps is the government taking to tackle such hate crime and promote community cohesion so that those seeking to divide our British society are not allowed to succeed?
Well, I thank him for his question. He does great work to bring our communities together, especially in Slough. But any form of racial or religious-based hatred is abhorrent and has no place in society. We have set aside over £50 million to protect faith communities and freedom of worship. That's the right thing to do. It's a shame that we have to do it. And our 15 million Community Recovery Fund has been supporting communities affected by the disorder last summer. Again, the right thing to do, but it's a shame that we have to do it.
So Roger Gale.
Sorry, guys, I'm just going to pause it here. 1 second. I have a question for you, right? With Rachel Reeve sat behind him, do you think she's just thinking, oh my God, I hope things just kind of simmer down a little bit? Do you think she's anxious about the fact that she's going to have to deliver a lot of bad news? And this is kind of like the preamble. It feels like there's a lot of understanding in the questions and the responses. There's a lot of politicking going on, trying to temper the atmosphere, because I cannot imagine that if she's going to get up and she's going to cut benefits, that is going to go down anywhere near as well with people in that chamber right now. I just can't see that. Off screen, she's just winced in the background. I need to bring this back up, actually. Let me bring this back up. Just pay attention to her and her kind of like her expressions in the background, because she must be nervous. I would be nervous.
Constituency of North Ayrshire and Arran, the SNP ferry fiasco is having a devastating social and economic impact on our Drossen and the Isle of Arran. As well as building a Calmac ferry that doesn't fit into the existing harbour, the Fraser of Allender Institute estimates that the disrupted ferries cost the Isle of Arran £170,000 of lost revenue per day. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that the SNP government needs to find a rapid solution to swiftly address this serious situation?
I thank her for fighting SNP incompetence on behalf of her constituents. Yet again, the SNP are failing island communities. Hospital appointments are being missed and livelihoods destroyed. And Scotland has a proud history of shipbuilding and engineering. The SNP should be supporting Scottish workers and focusing on delivering for our communities.
Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Cantor Magna in my constituency is proposed as a site for a new energy from waste incinerator, which will burn 260,000 tonnes of waste a year, more than the whole of Dorset's use. And I'm concerned that as we reduce our levels of waste with the brilliant new plans to recycle more, we're going to end up having to feed the monster. The area already has 95% of the capacity. So does the Prime Minister agree with me that we shouldn't allow new plants where we already have sufficient capacity, or where carbon capture is not going to be included?
Yeah. I hope she'll forgive me. The details of the particular incinerator she speaks of, I don't know the details. I'm not across that. But I will make sure that she gets an answer to her question in written form as soon as possible.
Chris MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I commend my right honourable friend for his leadership on Ukraine, showing that the UK is once again at the forefront of protecting democratic freedoms. Does he agree with me that as our defence spending increases, we need to support our supply chain companies to increase their capability, creating good jobs and apprenticeships in places like Stockton North and across the country? And will he meet with me and our Teesside Defence and Innovation Cluster that I've established, which is helping to create that new defence capability for the UK?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is a once-in-a-generation moment for security of our country and our continent. We've set out that fully funded increase in defence spending to 2.5% in 2027, the biggest sustained boost since the Cold War. But that must benefit British jobs and British businesses. And that's why I'll make sure that he gets the meeting that he wants with the relevant minister.
Can I just chime in on that point that you just made there? So he's talked a little bit about defence here, and obviously there's been a boost across Europe for defence spending because of Trump's stance that they don't necessarily want to be footing the bill for all of the European military deficiencies in their contribution to NATO. So what we've seen recently when it comes to the markets is a huge uptick in the European stock market, the DAX specifically, around defense stocks. It's been, I wouldn't say a surprise, but it's definitely been something that from an investment point of view, if you're talking about investing and actually invested in the stock market where you can actually gain a little bit of growth, Europe has had a resurgence because of this specifically. So we're going to increase in our defense spending today. Most of the European countries and NATO allies have done exactly the same. Canada played a really, really nice ball game with raising some government debt and actually sending it to Europe. to counteract this whole situation where there's this, obviously, trade war, tariff war going on with Trump and the US. And they did that by, number one, gauging whether people would be interested in buying Canadian debt, government bonds, which they were. And actually, because if they have to spend a little bit more money on defense now, well, it actually makes sense. So from an investment point of view, Europe is coming back just on the news of defense stocks alone. So an interesting take maybe for those of you who may be looking at your investment portfolios right now, looking at, okay, where are the opportunities? Because let's face it, the US stock market, particularly the Magnificent Seven, they've taken a bit of a battering over the past, I want to say 6 to 8 weeks. Tesla's down, 49%. Their sales are absolutely tumbling. And most of the tech stocks as well are not at the positions that they were before. It does represent an opportunity over the long term, but if you're looking at your portfolios right now, it can be quite painful. It is painful. I can definitely get that. It comes through loud and clear in some of the comments that I'm seeing and conversations that I'm having. But, you know, there is perhaps a little bit of hope in other areas of the world actually doing well, namely Europe, because of the defense spending. And it definitely drives home the point of having a globally diversified portfolio, not just reliant on the US. Let's get back to this one.
We'll be meeting the group, I think, today, and I look forward to meeting them in the future, because we must prioritise victims and make sure sentences punish offenders and protect the public. So thank him for raising this really important set of cases.
That completes Prime Minister's questions. We'll let front bench change over.
Well, that was it from Sir Keir Starmer, saying he had full confidence in his Chancellor, at one point also facing questions on why Labour isn't banning mobile phones in schools and whether or not they need to review security arrangements with the United States in the wake of that extraordinary scandal with the journalists being invited to a signal group. But now it's the main event.
Rachel Reeve.
Here we go.
Mr. Speaker, this Labour government was elected to bring...
Okay, maybe I need to find an alternative here. So bear me 1 second while I just find an alternative one, because it seems that this is going to have to be on a different feed. Bear with me just 1 second. Here we go. Let's stop saving this.
Rebuilding our public investment in our NHS, bringing waiting lists down for 5 months in a row.
This is the spin.
And
Spin,
increasing
spin, spin.
the national living wage to give 3 million people a pay rise from next week. Now our task is to secure Britain's future in a world that is changing before our eyes.
Apologies, that might have been me. Let's get back to that.
That work began in July, and I am proud of what we have delivered in just 9 months. Restoring stability to our public finances, giving the Bank of England the foundation to cut interest rates 3 times since the general election. Rebuilding our public services with record investment in our NHS, bringing waiting lists down for 5 months in a row. And increasing the national living wage to give 3 million people a pay rise from next week. Now our task is to secure Britain's future in a world that is changing before our eyes. The threat facing our continent was transformed when Putin invaded Ukraine. It has since escalated further and will continue to evolve rapidly. At the same time, the global economy has become more uncertain, bringing insecurity at home as trading patterns become more unstable and borrowing costs rise for many major economies. Mr. Speaker, the job of a responsible government is not simply to watch this change. This moment demands an active government, a government not stepping back, but stepping up. A government on the side of working people, helping Britain to reach its potential. And Mr. Speaker, we have the strength to do just that. as one of the world's largest economies, an ally to trading partners across the globe, and a hub for global innovation. These strengths and the progress that we have made so far mean that we can act quickly and decisively in a more uncertain world to secure Britain's future and to deliver prosperity for working people. Mr. Speaker, as I set out at the budget last year, I am today returning to the House to provide an update on our public finances, supported by a new forecast from the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility. Ahead of a full spending review in June, I will then return to the House in the autumn to deliver a budget in line with our commitment to deliver just one major fiscal event a year. So let me now turn to the OBR's forecasts. And I want to thank Richard Hughes and his team for their dedicated work. The increased global uncertainty has had two consequences. First, on our public finances, and second, on our economy. I will take each in turn. In the autumn, I set out our new fiscal rules that would guide this government. These fiscal rules are non-negotiable. They are the embodiment of this government's unwavering commitment to bring stability to our economy and to ensure security for working people. Because the British people have seen what happens when a government borrows beyond their means. The mini-budget delivered by the party opposite resulted in higher bills, in higher rents and higher mortgages. And Mr. Speaker, it was not the wealthy who suffered most when they crushed the economy, it was ordinary working people. And they continue to feel the effects 2.5 years later of the damage that the party opposite did. Now let me be clear. There is nothing progressive, there is nothing Labour about working people paying the price for economic irresponsibility. The British people put their trust in this Labour government because they knew that I would never take risks with the public finances, that we would never do anything to put household finances in danger. And we must earn that trust every single day. The two rules that I set out at the budget were first, our stability rule, which ensures that public spending is under control, balancing the current budget by 2029-30, so that day-to-day spending is met by tax receipts. Second, our investment rule, to drive growth in the economy, ensuring that net financial debt falls by the end of the forecast period, while enabling us to invest alongside business. Turning first to the stability rule, the OBR's forecast shows that before the steps that I will take in this statement, the current budget would have been in deficit by £4.1 billion in 2029-30, having been in surplus by £9.9 billion in the autumn, as the UK, alongside our international peers like France and Germany, has seen the cost of borrowing rise during this period of heightened uncertainty in global markets. As a result of the steps that I am taking today, I can confirm that I have restored in full our headroom against the stability rule. Moving from a deficit of £36.1 billion in 2025-26 and £13.4 billion in 2026-27 to a surplus of £6.0 billion in 27-28, £7.1 billion in 2028-29, and a surplus of £9.9 billion in 2029-30. That compares to the headroom left by the previous government of just £6.5 billion. That means we are continuing to meet the stability rule 2 years early, building resilience to shocks in this, a more uncertain world. The OBR forecast that the investment rule is also met 2 years early, with net financial debt of 82.9% of GDP in 25-26 and 83.5% in 26-27, before falling to 83.4% in 27-28, in 83.2% in 2028-29, and then to 82.7% in 2029-30, providing headroom of £15.1 billion in the final year of the forecast, broadly unchanged from the autumn. After the last government doubled the national debt, after they doubled the national debt interest payments now stand at £105.2 billion this year. Mr. Speaker, that is more than we allocate to defence, the Home Office and the Ministry of Justice combined. That is the legacy of the party opposite. So the responsible choice is to reduce our levels of debt and borrowing in the years ahead so that we can spend more on the priorities of working people. And that is exactly what this government will do. Mr. Speaker, I said that our fiscal rules were non-negotiable, and I meant it. I will always deliver economic stability, and I will always put working people first. I said it at the election, I said it at the budget, and I say it again today. Let me now set out the steps that the government has taken. At the budget, we protected working people by keeping our promise not to raise their rates of national insurance, income tax or VAT. At the same time, we began to rebuild our public services after the party opposite left a £22 billion black hole in our public finances. Ours were the right choices for stability and the right choices for renewal, funded by the decisions that we took on tax. As I promised in the autumn, this statement does not contain any further tax increases. But when working people are paying their taxes while still struggling with the cost of living, it cannot be right that others are still evading what they rightly owe in tax. In the budget, I delivered the most ambitious package of measures that we have ever seen to cut down on tax evasion, raising £6.5 billion per year by the end of the forecast. Today, I go further, continuing our investment in cutting-edge technology, investing in the HMRC's capacity to crack down on tax avoidance, and setting out plans to increase the number of tax fraudsters charged every year by 20%. These changes raise a further £1 billion, taking the total revenue raised from reducing tax evasion under this Labour government to £7.5 billion. These figures are verified by the Office for Budget Responsibility, and I want to thank my honourable friend, the Exchequer Secretary, for his continued work in this area. Mr. Speaker, last week, my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, set out this government's plans to reform the welfare system. The Labour Party is the party of work. We believe that if you can work, you should work. But if you can't work, you should be properly supported. This government inherited a broken system. More than 1,000 people every day are qualifying for personal independence payments. 1 in 8 young people are not in employment, education or training. If we do nothing, we are writing off an entire generation. That cannot be right, and we will not stand for it. It is a waste of their potential, and it is a waste of their futures, and we will change it. As my right honourable friend said in her statement last week, the final costings would be subject to the OBR's assessment. Today, the OBR have said that they estimate that the package will save £4.8 billion in the welfare budget, reflecting their judgments on behavioural effects and wider factors. This also reflects final adjustments to the overall package, consistent with the Secretary of State's statement last week and the government's Pathways to Work Green Paper. The Universal Credit Standard Allowance will increase from £92 per week in 25-26 to £106 a week by 29-30, while the Universal Credit Health element will be cut for new claimants by around 50% and then frozen. On top of this, we are investing £1 billion to provide guaranteed, personalised employment support to help people back into work. And £4 £400 million to support the Department for Work and Pensions and our job centres to deliver these changes effectively and fairly, taking total savings after that to the package to £3.4 billion. While spending on disability and sickness benefits will continue to rise, these plans mean that welfare spending as a share of GDP will fall between 2026 and the end of the forecast period, very different to what we inherited from the party opposite. We are reforming our welfare system, making it more sustainable, protecting the most vulnerable, and most importantly, supporting more people back into secure work, lifting them out of poverty. Mr. Speaker, at the budget, I fixed the foundations of our economy to deliver on the promise of change. That work has already begun. 2 million extra appointments in our NHS. Waiting lists down. New breakfast clubs opening across England. The largest settlements in real terms for Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland in the history of devolution. Asylum costs falling, promises made, promises kept, and every single one of them opposed by the parties opposite. At the budget, alongside providing an increase in funding for this year and next, I set the envelope for the spending review, which we will deliver in June, led by my right honourable friend, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, to set departmental budgets until 28-29 for day-to-day spending and until 2029-30 for capital spending. Today, I'm reflecting two steps that we have taken on our spending plans. First, because we are living in an uncertain world, as the Prime Minister has set out, we will increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP, reducing overseas aid to 0.3% of gross national income. This means we save £2.6 billion in day-to-day spending in 2029-30 to fund our more capital-intensive defence commitments. Second, in recent months, we have begun to fundamentally reform the British state, driving efficiency and productivity across government, to deliver tangible savings and improve services across our country. Earlier the Prime Minister set out plans to abolish the arm's-length body NHS England and ensure that that money goes directly to improving the service for patients. My right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, is driving forward vital reforms to increase NHS productivity, bearing down on costly agency spend to save money so that we can improve patient care. And my right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, is taking forward work to significantly reduce the costs of running government by 15%, worth £2 billion by the end of the decade. This work shows that we can make our state leaner and more agile, delivering more resources to the front line, while ensuring that we control day-to-day spending to meet our fiscal rules. Today, I build on that work by bringing forward £3.25 billion of investment to deliver the reforms that our public services need through a new transformation fund. That is money brought forward now to bring down the costs of running government by the end of the forecast period, by making public services more efficient, more productive, and more focused on the user. I can confirm today the first allocations from this fund, including funding for voluntary exit schemes to reduce the size of the civil service, pioneering AI tools to modernise the state, investment in top technology for the Ministry of Justice to deliver probation services more effectively, and upfront investment so we can support more children into foster care to give them the best possible start in life and reduce cost pressures in the future. Our work to make government leaner, more productive and more efficient will help deliver a further £3.5 billion of day-to-day savings by 2029-30. Overall, day-to-day spending will be reduced by £6.1 billion in 2029-30, and it will now grow by an average of 1.2% a year above inflation, compared to 1.3% in the autumn. Mr. Speaker, I can confirm to the House that day-to-day spending will increase in real terms above inflation in every single year of the forecast. And in the spending review, apart from the reductions in overseas aid, day-to-day spending across government has been fully protected. I can also confirm our approach to capital investment. In the autumn budget, I announced £100 billion of additional capital spending to crowd in investment from the private sector, to fix our crumbling infrastructure, and to create jobs in every corner of our country. Today, I am not cutting capital spending, as the party opposite did time and time again, because that choked off growth and it left our school roofs literally crumbling. That was the wrong choice. It was the irresponsible choice. It was the Tory choice. Today, I am instead increasing capital spending by an average of £2 billion per year compared with the autumn, to drive growth in our economy and to deliver in full our vital commitments on defence. This government will ensure that every pound we spend will deliver for the British people by increasing productivity, driving growth in our economy and improving our frontline public services. Mr. Speaker, let me turn now to the impact of increased uncertainty on our economy. To deliver economic stability, we must work closely with the Bank of England, supporting the Independent Monetary Policy Committee to meet their 2% inflation target. There have been 3 interest rate cuts since the general election, and today's data showed that inflation fell in February. Having peaked at 11% under the previous government, the OBR forecast that CPI inflation will average 3.2% this year before falling rapidly to 2.1% in 2026 and meeting the 2% target from 2027 onwards, giving families and businesses the security that they need and providing our economy with the stable platform it needs to grow. Mr. Speaker, earlier this month, the OECD downgraded this year's growth forecast for every G7 economy, including the UK. And the OBR have today revised down our growth forecast for 2025, from 2% in the autumn to 1% today. I am not satisfied with these numbers, and that is why we on this side of the House are serious about taking the action needed to grow our economy. Backing the builders, not the blockers, with a 3rd runway at Heathrow Airport and the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. Increasing investment with reforms to our pension system and a new national wealth fund. And tearing down regulatory barriers in every sector of our economy. That is a serious plan for growth. That is a serious plan to improve living standards. That is a serious plan to renew our country. Mr. Speaker, a changing world presents challenges, but it also presents new opportunities for new jobs and new contracts in our world-class defence industrial centres, from Belfast to Deeside and from Plymouth to Rosyth. In February, the Prime Minister set out our government's commitment to increase spending on defence to 2.5% of GDP from April 2027, the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War, with an ambition to spend 3% of GDP on defence in the next Parliament. That was the right decision in a more insecure world, putting an extra £6.4 billion into defence spending by 2027. But we have to move quickly in this changing world, and that starts with investment. So today I can confirm that I will provide an additional £2.2 billion for the Ministry of Defence in the next financial year, a further down payment on our plans to deliver 2.5% of GDP by 2027. This additional investment is not just about increasing our national security, but increasing our economic security too. As defence spending rises, I want the whole country to feel its benefits. So I will now set out the immediate steps that we are taking to boost Britain's defence industry and to make the UK a defence industrial superpower. We will spend a minimum of 10% of the Ministry of Defence's equipment budget on new novel technologies, including drones and AI-enabled technology, driving forward advanced manufacturing production in places like Glasgow, in Derby and in Newport, creating demand for highly skilled engineers and scientists, and delivering new business opportunities for UK tech firms and startups. We will establish a protected budget of £400 million within the Ministry of Defence, a budget that will rise over time for UK defence innovation, with a clear mandate to bring innovative technology to the front line at speed. And we will reform our broken defence procurement system, making it quicker, more agile and more streamlined, and giving small businesses across the UK better access to Ministry of Defence contracts, something welcomed by the Federation of Small Businesses. We will take forward our plan for Barrow, a town at the heart of our nuclear security, working with my honourable friend, the member for Barrow and Furness, and providing £200 million, supporting the creation of thousands of jobs there. We will regenerate Portsmouth Naval Base, securing its future, as called for by my honourable friend, the member for Portsmouth South. We will secure better homes for thousands of military families, the homes that they deserve denied to them by the previous governments. Homes for our military families in constituencies of my honourable friends for Plymouth Moorview, Plymouth Sutton and Devonport, York Outer and in Aldershot. That is the difference that this Labour government is making. Finally, Mr Speaker, we will provide £2 billion of increased capacity for UK export finance, to provide loans for overseas buyers of UK defence goods and services, because I want to do more with our defence budget so we can buy and make and sell things here in Britain. Giving further opportunities for our world-leading defence companies and those who work in them to grow and create jobs here in Britain as military spending rightly increases all across Europe. To oversee all of this vital work, my right honourable friend, the Defence Secretary, and I will establish a new Defence Growth Board to maximise the benefits from every pound of taxpayers' money that we spend. And we will put defence at the heart of our modern industrial strategy to drive innovation that can deliver huge benefits back into the British economy. Mr Speaker, that is how we make our country a defence industrial superpower. So the skills of the future, the jobs of the future and the opportunities of the future can be found right here in the United Kingdom. Mr Speaker, as the previous government learned to their detriment, there are no shortcuts to economic growth. It will take long-term decisions. It will take hard yards. It will take time for the reforms that we are introducing to be felt in the everyday economy. It is right that the Office for Budget Responsibility consider the evidence and look carefully at measures before recognising a growth impact in their forecast. But, Mr Speaker, I can announce to the House that the OBR have considered and have scored one of the central planks of our plan for growth. In my first week as Chancellor, I announced that we were pursuing the most ambitious set of planning reforms in decades to get Britain building again. And in December, we published changes to the National Planning Policy Framework, driven forward tirelessly by my right honourable friend, the Deputy Prime Minister. Reintroducing mandatory housing targets and bringing grey belt land into scope. The OBR have today concluded that these reforms will permanently increase the level of real GDP by 0.2% in 29-30, an additional £6.8 billion for our economy, and by 0.4% of GDP within 10 years, an additional £15.1 billion in our British economy. Mr Speaker, that is the biggest positive growth impact that the OBR have ever reflected in their forecast for a policy with no fiscal cost. And taken together with our plans to increase capital spending that we set out in the budget last year, this government's policies will increase the level of real GDP by 0.6% in the next 10 years. Mr Speaker, that is the difference that this Labour government is making. Policies to grow our economy, promises by a Labour government, delivered by a Labour government, opposed by the parties opposite. Mr Speaker, the planning system that we inherited was far too slow. The OBR have concluded that our reforms will lead to house building reaching a 40-year high. 305,000 homes a year by the end of the forecast period. And changes to the National Planning Policy Framework alone will help build over 1.3 million homes in the UK over the next 5 years, taking us within touching distance of delivering our manifesto promise to build 1.5 million homes in England in this Parliament. Homes promised by this Labour government, homes built by this Labour government, homes opposed by the parties opposite. The impact on our economy goes further still. I said at the election that we could not simply tax and spend our way to prosperity. We need economic growth. So I can today confirm that the effect of our growth policies, including our planning reforms, means an additional £3.4 billion to support our public finances and our public services by 2029-30. The proceeds of growth promised by this Labour government, delivered by this Labour government, opposed by the parties opposite. Mr. Speaker, earlier this week, we provided an additional £2 billion of investment in social and affordable homes next year, delivering up to 18,000 new homes and allowing local areas to bid for new development across our country, including sites in Thanet, in Sunderland and in Swindon. More security for families across our country, promised by this Labour government, delivered by this Labour government and opposed by the parties opposite. And to build these new homes, we need people with the right skills. Earlier this week, my right honourable friend, the Education Secretary, announced more than £600 million to train up 60,000 more construction workers, including with 10 new technical excellence colleges across every region of our country, giving working people the chance to fulfil their potential. New opportunities for our young people, promised by this Labour government, delivered by this Labour government, opposed by the parties opposite. Mr. Speaker, all this is just the start. The Planning and Infrastructure Bill passed its second reading on Monday. No thanks to the parties opposite. Once this bill completes its passage, it will help deliver the homes and infrastructure our country badly needs. And I say to the parties opposite, the British people will be watching. Because if the parties opposite don't support these reforms, let us be clear about what that means. They are opposing economic growth. They are opposing more homes for families. They are opposing good jobs across our country. We on this side are clear about whose side we are on. The parties opposite must decide too. This Labour government is taking the right decisions now to secure Britain's future. And today I can confirm to the House that the OBR have upgraded their growth forecast next year and every single year thereafter. With GDP growth of 1.9% in 2026, of 1.8% in 2027, 1.7% in 2028, and 1.8% in 2029. Mr. Speaker, by the end of the forecast, our economy is larger compared to the OBR's forecast at the time of the budget. That is the difference that this Labour government is making. But, Mr. Speaker, this isn't just about lines on a graph. It's about improving people's lives. Working people are still feeling the pinch after a cost of living crisis caused by the party opposite that caused interest rates and inflation to go through the roof. So I am pleased that the OBR confirmed today that real household disposable income will now grow this year at almost twice the rate expected in the autumn. Compared to the forecast in the final budget delivered by the party opposite, and after taking into account inflation, the OBR say today that people will be, on average, over £500 a year better off under this Labour government. That will mean more money in the pockets of working people, higher living standards promised by this Labour government, delivered by this Labour government, opposed by the parties opposite. Mr. Speaker, the world is changing. We can see that and we can feel it. A changing world demands a government that is on the side of working people, acting in their interest, acting in the national interest, not retreating from challenges, not stepping back, but a government with the courage to step up, to secure Britain's future, and to seize the opportunities that are out there before us. I am impatient for change. The British people are impatient for change after 14 years of failure. And we are beginning to see change happen. Our plan for change is working. Defence spending is rising. Waiting lists are falling. Wages are up. Interest rates are cut. That is the difference that this Labour government is making. And today, Mr. Speaker, the OBR confirm that our plan to get Britain building will drive growth in our economy and put more money in people's pockets. There are no quick fixes, but we have taken the right choices, returning stability to our economy after years of mismanagement by the party opposite, delivering security for our country and security for working people. That is what drives this government. That is what drives me as Chancellor. That is what drives the choices that I have set out today. And I commend this statement to the House.
All right.
Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride.
Before we get into Mel Stride, let's just, there's a whole lot of waffle going on here. And the thing that annoys me the most whenever you hear these types of statements is the constant pitting between what they're doing and what another party is doing. You are the party in office right now, so you just take charge of what it is that you're doing. We don't need a reminder that the other parties, these are your decisions. So, what have they mentioned here? We know for a fact there are cuts coming. She's already announced them. 10,000 jobs effectively in the civil service are going to be gone because she's looking to reduce the cost of the civil service by 15%. 10,000 jobs is the estimation in order to be able to do that. What else does she mention here? NHS England. Let's talk about that. I actually think that's probably a good thing, to be honest, because I had a conversation with my accountant probably about 2 weeks ago. He came to see me and he was talking about how for the HS2, for example, the consulting company for HS2 was billing the government something ridiculous like 10 million a month. And that was just on consultancy fees. Like the level of red tape is freaking ridiculous. So things like NHS England to try and streamline, I'm not necessarily opposed to, because we've got too much red tape, too much bureaucracy, that it ends up costing more money in just to get the job done, because you've got all of this red tape and all of these sign-off procedures that need to be done. We need to cut right to the core of the problem without having to go through consultancies to consider what the pros and cons and whatever it is that they do might be. So that I can get on board with. This whole idea that they've talked about the universal credits. So the standard allowance is going to go up from £92 per week to £106 per week. That's the standard allowance, but the health element being cut by 50%, then being frozen. Look, we are a nation that needs to be productive, for sure. And from an economic point of view, you just cannot have a large proportion of society not working, not generating income that can be used, obviously, as part of the taxed revenues to drive the economy. We can't have that. So to a certain extent, I can see sense in that policy because we want more people to be working, especially younger people. The problem here is, though, there is bound to be a situation where you don't quite capture the right people in the net. So there will be some people who potentially cannot work, literally, legitimately cannot work, that might be forced to work. So that's going to be a contentious point, and how they're going to make sure that they nail this and get it right. I'm sure we're going to hear stories at some point in the future with people complaining that I fall into this net where I physically cannot work, I legitimately cannot work, but I'm being forced to find work. I'm sure that's going to be a thing. There'll be headlines about it moving forward. But the general overarching kind of premise of that is, I guess, positive, because we do need productivity in this country, and that's something that we have struggled on. Now, nothing on ISIS as expected. House building. So home building is going to be boosted. So 1.3 million homes over the course of 5 years. That is going to help first-time buyers for sure. However, previous governments have announced initiatives to boost house building and set targets. And guess what's happened? Absolutely nothing. So what is going to make this different? £2 billion for affordable homes, which is going to be about 18,000 homes roughly in specific locations. What we're not seeing here, and this is a dual equation. For this to work out, you need two things. You need, yes, the homes to be built, but you also need the ability for people to be able to have enough money being earned to actually get the deposits for these homes. And what we've not seen is some kind of initiative to help first-time buyers get on the property ladder, like a Help to Buy or something like that. We've not seen anything new there. They're saying 18,000 affordable homes, but what is affordable? Especially when you get down to the point where they're saying that, higher living standards. I mean, this is just freaking laughable to me. Higher living standards because you're going to have £500 a year extra in your pocket. I'm sorry, but I don't see that as being something that you would class as a higher living standard. 500 quid, £60 a month. What does 60 quid a month do for most people? What does it pay for most people? You tell me. I mean, how you could say that means higher living standards is beyond me. I mean, we probably have different definitions of a higher living standard. All of these things that have been announced, the fundamental question that is going to be asked is, after all is said and done, do people feel better off in the long run? The economic forecast being improved over the next few years. Okay, fantastic. But these are forecasts. These are forecasts based on what's happening right now. The world is a rapidly changing place. Who knew in January that Trump was actually serious about tariffs and was going to go on a tariff war? Who thought that was going to be possible? And by the way, we've been extremely lucky because he's not really set his sights on us. But he is interfering in other ways. So I don't know if you've been reading, but he's insisting that we don't raise taxes on some of the tech firms, the Facebooks of this world in the UK, because obviously Zuck, Elon, Jeff, all of those guys are in his back pocket. They were all at the inauguration at the front row. So he's influencing our internal taxation policies. They're talking about the HMRC being funded to go after tax evaders, right? But there's nothing in there about perhaps introducing a temporary wealth tax. There is nothing about making sure that corporations pay their fair due. Like, those are larger pots of money. Instead, HMRC will go after Joe Bloggs, who's a self-employed plumber, who may not necessarily have enough money to cover his mortgage and live, raising his family. Those are the people HMRC are targeting. Yet we have Trump, who hasn't necessarily said, well, we're going to put tariffs on the UK, trying to influence what we're doing internally through other means by way of giving Bezos, Elon, Zucks some kind of tax cut so that their businesses aren't impacted, i.e. meaning better returns, more money in the slush fund for their investors, their shareholders, so on and so forth. I mean, this really is one of those things that in the scheme of things, you start to ask the question of, are we doing the right thing? Are the government willing to do the right thing or looking at the right things? I mean, look, I'm not an economist. I wouldn't want to be a politician trying to figure any of this out. But I'm pretty sure that some people most people who would look at this think, if you're going to go after tax evaders, go after the people that do business here, that have funds, who are huge corporations who are currently paying nothing. Like, get something from them, because that will take the burden off normal working people who they are professing to protect. And this is not just about Labour. This is about any political party, right? And I get the economic argument that these companies effectively provide jobs. They employ people, which in its turn generates tax revenues. But at the same time, you have to have a fair and equitable relationship. Is it fair or is it right? And this will be for you to decide, and maybe for us to debate at some stage, that these companies can come here, yes, employ people, but make huge profits. And whilst employing people, and just because they're employing people, not pay any tax on their profits generated from the UK. I mean, you tell me. It's one of those situations where it's a very, very, I guess, touchy topic to approach from a political point of view, because there is always a give and take of some kind. What else did we write here? £2 billion in affordable homes. We've already covered that. Defense spending, I think, generally speaking, is a very good thing. She talked about 600 million to train construction workers. They are on one hand saying that they want to, I guess, they want us to be front runners in this whole AI tech kind of revolution. The question then becomes, and it's a double-edged, I mean, I'm just looking at this from maybe the demographic that I'm exposed to on this channel. I don't know that many people who actually want to be construction workers in today's day and age. And 600 million quid to train construction workers, yes, it's a good initiative, I would suppose, but how attractive is that job to a youngster right now? I don't think it will be that attractive. And I think that is a root problem that you would need to address. How do you make it attractive to a youngster coming out of, college to want to train as a construction worker? What do they get in exchange? What's the progression? How do you sell this to them? I don't know how you would sell that job to them. I really, really don't. But I guess as an initiative, it shows proactivity to get younger people in the workforce, in the workplace, and get them to be, I guess, productive from an economic point of view. What else did I write down here? National Wealth Fund, pension reform. So we don't have a national wealth fund, obviously, unlike the likes of Norway and some of the other Scandinavian countries. I think not having one is absolute travesty, because ultimately, when you think about our pension system, state pension specifically, all of that money is being funded from the tax take right now. And we already know that there's a population issue in terms of the sustainability of the state pension and the triple lock that sits on top of it. So a national wealth fund would be great, but will this national wealth fund be actually used for those things? She's mentioned pension reforms here. What pension reforms specifically? There was a lot of chatter about bringing in reforms that would require pension funds to invest more in the UK, which on the surface would absolutely make sense, but on one hand, it goes against investment logic. If the biggest market is America, which it is, by the way, why would a pension fund that is mandated to achieve the highest returns possible within certain risk elements for its customers invest in the UK that has been lagging behind for a while? They would have to mandate something. They would have to sweeten the pot in some way, shape, or form. So how this pension reform will come about, I absolutely do not know. But I guess that is something that we're going to have to poke and prod about a bit later on. I'm just going to read through your comments right here, because there were some golden comments as we were watching this through. And Stride is still speaking, talking about, she's the architect of her own misfortune with some of the decisions that she made in the budget last July. Let me just have a look through some of the comments. Let me just scan really quickly. There's lots of comments about smoke and mirrors, finger pointing. So Carlos is saying here, with a huge majority, it doesn't really matter what the opposition is saying, and that's absolutely true. Pointing the finger when you're delivering this type of news, it's pointless. You have the majority in the House, so you can do whatever you want to do. They don't really have the ability to oppose. So it's that political posturing, right? Trying to justify what you're doing, the decision that you're making, by juxtaposing the position of a previous party against what you're currently doing right now. It's just political posturing. So someone's just saying here, in all the government departments, it's all run by large consultancies, hence the IT is atrocious and never on time. You know, on the IT and the consultancy things, you know, this is an industry, and I think that's something that we need to grasp. And here's the insidious thing. So speaking to my accountant, he was talking about how this company was charging the government 10 million quid a month for consultancy fees on HS2. What happens is venture capital companies. So venture capital companies are basically companies that will buy a company because there's a shed ton of money being made, and they basically take ownership of it. These consultancy companies are bought up by venture capitalists who only buy the companies for profit. That's it. You've got a government contract that is 10 million a month, 120 million a year. That for them is a great investment because it's a huge return. And that's problematic because you cannot have that type of thing happening. The insidious thing is, if you go and have a look, and I've not had a look at this, but my suspicion would be if you go and have a look at who owns or is involved in these venture capitalist companies, I wonder whether you would find a couple of MPs or people who are connected to MPs involved with those venture capitalist companies. Now, that might be a bit of a conspiracy theory, but it wouldn't surprise me if that is the case. One thing we definitely need to do is we need to drive more efficiencies through the government. So I commend the statement to the bin. So nothing has happened with ISAs. If you watch the video from yesterday, what they're basically saying is that whilst it has been considered, there's nothing going to be announced right now, but there may be changes that come along in the autumn statement. So I've just been saying this, and I've been, regurgitating this on, my socials, is that the only thing they're doing here is they're raising this as an issue for you to be aware of. So in April, if they do decide, let's seriously have a look at ISAs. And this is not the first time. Like on the channel over the past couple of years, I've covered instances where they've tried to figure out how they can tax ISAs. If you remember, they started raising the question about fractional shares in ISAs and how they weren't allowed because the rule that was written, I think in 1985 or something like that, didn't specifically mention fractional shares before fractional shares didn't even exist at that point, right? So this is something they've been thinking about doing. Why? Because there's a lot of money in cash ISAs, right? And it's not that they're going to be able to touch the money that you currently have, but they can prevent people from putting money in to increase the tax revenues. That's what I was trying to explain on the video yesterday. Now, nothing so far, nothing right now, but it may be revisited in autumn. That's what we've heard. So we're going to have to wait till the autumn budget to know whether that is something that they will seriously consider cutting potentially. I hope not, but we have no control over these things. I mean, look, we laugh about 60 quid being a weekly shop for a single person, but if it's a weekly shop for a single person, actually, whilst I jest about it, I can see that having a positive impact. If you've got extra money in your pocket to be able to make sure that you can feed yourself a week if you're a single person, I think that's probably a bit of a positive, to be fair. But I still don't believe that 500 quid a year is what you would shout out about being a rise in living standards. Like, that's not a rise in living standards at all for me personally, but we'll see. What else have we got here? Just scanning. God, just said it exactly the point, right? Electricity bills and energy bills have gone up so much, but they're harping on about 500 quid extra. So even let's just say your energy cost went up by 500 quid, you're now cost neutral. You're no better off. So that's not really an increase. It's not an improvement at all. There was a great comment on here about there being the need for wholesale change, so comprehensive change across the government. And I agree with that, and it's something we've been saying for some time. I'm sure many of you follow Gary's economics. Gary, he did a great job on Davia's CEO, but was published, I think, last week. And yeah, I just don't think there is the appetite for wholesale change. How do you change an entire system? I mean, this is the issue. The fact that we're kind of like an old economy and a more mature country means that any little change is very, very hard to pull off. It's like trying to turn a tanker right. It takes time and it takes effort. And in this case, I don't think there is the political will to actually want to make wholesale change. And we could say this across so many things, right? Public services, the NHS. There are so many things you can point to that need wholesale change. I just don't think it will happen, personally speaking. Besides that point, these guys are only in office for 5 years. What can you really do in 5 years? You can't change an entire system in 5 years. It's impossible. So either the system needs to change, literally the whole thing needs to change. And I don't see how that happens at any point in the near future. This is another point on the whole 600 million for construction workers. How does that money actually get allocated? How does it get allocated? You talk about affordable homes, but actually what you're doing is you're funding the builders, and the builders set the price. So are you giving 2 billion away with a mandate to say that these house prices need to be these homes need to be great quality of a particular standard and sell prices of this and no more? Are you mandating that? We don't know. Is that even necessary? You would think in 2025 it wouldn't be necessary, but apparently it will be, because at the end of the day, you cannot stop private companies from profiteering, because all companies are run for profit. And this is where it gets into a nasty kind of like cycle. The government taxes business more, funds businesses, and because they're being taxed more, well, they need to deliver profits for them and their owners, their shareholders. So you can't break free of it. It's really unfortunate. And this is the problem with capitalism, right? Which is, whilst the Western economies are built on capitalism and understanding that capitalism has been the foundation for a lot of our economies, it becomes problematic when capitalist ideals take over the need to have a functioning society with a mobile middle class, where you have the ability to move through the social kind of like constructs. Like, the more people you can go from low income households to middle class to what you would maybe assume to be wealthy, you need people to be able to move between those stages. When you can, everything feels so much easier and so much better. People feel so much better about what's happening because they feel like they're not stuck and they're not being repressed. Whereas currently, it feels like because wealth is being consolidated at the top, it's harder for people to go from low income to middle class and to even break through to that top echelon, because the top echelon have so much. This is the issue with capitalism. So when you talk about wholesale change, what do? Dismantle capitalism? How the hell is that going to happen? How does that happen? It pays for your pension. It's basically the fundamentals upon which investing and that entire industry is built. Like, our economy is built on capitalism. So how do you fix that? How do you even change any of that? It's almost incalculable. It's extremely hard to figure out how that would remotely be a possibility moving forward. And so this whole idea, you talk about tax the rich. I absolutely get it. But in an economy that has been built on capitalism and wealth is built through capitalism, the argument is, how can you tax or penalize the people that take the risk to build businesses in a capitalist society? It's something that I internally struggle with a lot on this channel, and even me personally, I struggle with it a lot, because starting your own business is not easy. There are so many risks. You take on so much personal and financial risk as an individual. So actually, there needs to be some sort of incentive for you. And we know that the companies that get to £1 million, 2 million, 100 million, 2 billion pound valuations, those are few and far between. There are so many businesses that fall along the wayside, where people remortgage their homes and take huge financial risks that do not work compared to those that do work. So where is the incentive for people actually starting to build something that eventually employs people? If you can make that environment conducive and encouraging to people who are willing to take the risk, then you have what feels like the beginnings of a stable economy. Because don't get me wrong, like, the huge companies that exist in the country at the moment, fantastic, great. They make a lot of money, they employ a lot of people. But the majority of businesses in the UK and in most countries are small to medium size. So that's where the support needs to happen. But again, how do you create an environment that really helps small to medium businesses to thrive and grow? That's the question that you need to answer as a politician, I guess, as a con as well. I'm just going to scan through the rest of these. By the way, if you've not already smashed the like button, let me just go check this, by the way. Please do so. At some point, we had like 238 people on here. The likes really just mean that this will get pushed out to other people who may want to also have watched along and kind of see some comments about the budget. So it only takes a second. I know it can be annoying when people ask you, when YouTubers ask you, but it makes a huge difference on my end of the equation, just in terms of this video actually being seen by other people who may end up being impacted positively by some of the comments and actually helping the channel also grow as well. What else do I need to cover here? I'm just scanning through the last bit of comments that we have. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Carlos. Really appreciate you guys being here. Kevin, how you doing? I think did you comment on the video? I think yesterday or last week you commented about missing the workshop. The best thing for you to do, mate, is join the mailing list, because on the mailing list, anytime I do something like that, it all goes out on the mailing list. I will provide the link to you in the comment section there. But I'm seeing some very, very familiar names. I appreciate you for joining me. I think we've actually got to go out because we've got a lunch or a dinner appointment. So I actually have to go. But thank you so much, guys. There's still 203 of you here. It's amazing. It's amazing, really. Thank you so much. Keep watching for the videos. I'm actually flying back to the UK at 2 a.m. this morning. Well, tomorrow morning, but in about, what, 7, 8 hours? I'm going to be back for a week, doing some work, having some meetings. And am I looking forward to it? I'm not looking forward to the cold weather. Let's put it that way. But thank you so much for joining. Catch you later on. Cheers.